I never imagined that a single sentence, spoken quietly, almost in a whisper, would shake my entire world. It was a normal afternoon, silent, ordinary, uneventful. I was in the kitchen preparing tea, thinking about nothing in particular, when my stepson walked in. His eyes looked different that day, not the usual spark of youth, not the usual restlessness, but something heavier, something that immediately made my heart sink. I looked up, expecting him to ask a simple question, expecting something normal. But instead, he stared directly into my eyes and said the one sentence that changed everything: "I can't take it anymore." The words stopped me. Not just my hands, not just my thoughts, but something deeper, like time itself paused for a moment. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that felt impossible to ignore. He didn't look angry. He didn't look frustrated. He looked hurt in a way I couldn't understand yet. And that scared me more than anything. I placed the cup down slowly, trying to read his expression, trying to understand what pain had driven him to say something so heavy. I asked him softly what he meant, but he didn't answer right away. He walked past me and sat at the dining table, placing both hands on his forehead. I could see his shoulders trembling. I could see the kind of emotional exhaustion that doesn't come overnight. Something inside me told me this wasn't about school, or friends, or a simple argument. This was deeper. Personal. Heavy. Something he had been holding inside for far too long. I sat down across from him, leaving enough space so he wouldn't feel pressured. I told him he could take his time, that he didn't have to force words out. I've always known him to be a quiet kid, someone who kept his feelings hidden behind jokes, schoolwork, or silence. But that day, there was no hiding. His walls were down, and whatever he was about to say would change our family forever, even if I didn't know it yet. Minutes passed before he finally lifted his head. His eyes were red, his expression exhausted. And then, in a voice that sounded like it had been waiting years to be heard, he began speaking. Slowly at first, hesitantly, as if he was afraid of how I would react. He said he couldn't handle the constant tension at home anymore. He couldn't pretend everything was fine. He couldn't carry the weight of secrets and lies, arguments and silence. He couldn't watch his father drift away. He couldn't keep pretending he didn't notice the growing emotional distance between us. My heart tightened. I knew things had been rough in the house lately. My marriage had been shaky, unstable, full of misunderstandings. But I had tried so hard to hide the cracks from him. I didn't want him to feel responsible. I didn't want him to be caught between his father and me. But despite all my efforts, he had seen everything. He had felt the tension. He had absorbed the silence. Children always do, even when adults try to protect them. He said he felt like he was living in a house full of unspoken truths. He felt like each room held a different argument, a different regret. He said he felt invisible, like his feelings didn't matter. And worst of all, he said he felt guilty for wanting peace when his family was falling apart. Guilt. That word hit me hardest. Because the truth was, I had been struggling silently too. I had been unhappy, confused, torn between staying strong and breaking down. I had been trying to hold myself together, trying to keep the family functioning, but inside, I was emotionally drowning. And without meaning to, I had become distant. I had become quiet, withdrawn, absent in ways I didn't notice. I never realized he interpreted it differently. I never realized he thought it was his fault. I reached across the table and placed my hand near his, not touching, just close enough so he could decide if he wanted comfort. He looked at my hand for a moment. Then he placed his own over it. His hand trembled. It felt like he hadn't been touched with gentleness in a long time. And that alone made tears rise in my eyes. He said he wanted to talk, but he didn't know how. He said he felt safer talking to me than to anyone else. He said he didn't want to lose the small family he still believed in. His voice cracked. And in that moment, I realized how deeply he had been hurting while trying to appear strong. I told him he wasn't alone. I told him nothing that was falling apart in the house was his responsibility. I told him he had every right to feel overwhelmed, every right to express his pain, every right to ask for stability. I also told him I was sorry for every moment I had been emotionally absent, sorry for every time he had felt invisible, sorry for every tear he had hidden because he didn't want to burden me. He listened quietly, his breathing slow and shaky. Then he said something that made me freeze. He confessed that he had been struggling ever since the arguments between his father and me began. He felt caught in the middle, like choosing sides would break him. He said he cared about me more than he expected to. Not in a confusing or inappropriate way, but in a deeply emotional, deeply personal way, like he felt protective of me. Like he didn't want to see me hurt. It wasn't unhealthy. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't inappropriate. It was the kind of bond that forms when two people in the same house are suffering silently and unintentionally lean on each other emotionally. He said he didn't want to see me crying behind closed doors anymore. That sentence told me everything. He had seen more than I realized. He had walked by my room late at night and overheard things. He had seen me wipe tears quickly before entering the living room. He had heard the tension in the hallway when we thought he was asleep. He said he felt helpless. And that helplessness was killing him inside. I felt my chest tighten with guilt. I never meant for him to carry emotional burdens meant for adults. I never meant for him to feel responsible for my tears. I moved to sit beside him, gently, slowly, giving him space, but showing I was there. He didn't pull away. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes, releasing a breath that sounded like it had been trapped inside him for years. I told him that we were going to fix things, not just the marriage, but the atmosphere in the house, the communication, the emotional safety. I told him I would not let him suffer silently anymore. He opened his eyes and asked if things would ever feel normal again. I didn't lie. I told him healing takes time, but families can rebuild. Relationships can be repaired. Emotional wounds can heal if we face them instead of hiding them. He nodded. For the first time that day, there was a little softness in his eyes. Later in the evening, he helped me prepare dinner. He didn't say much, but I could see the lightness in his movements. I could see the weight lifting slowly. Healing doesn't happen in a moment, but talking openly was the first step. In the days that followed, I tried harder to be present. I asked him how he was feeling. I listened when he spoke. I reassured him when he doubted himself. I tried to rebuild the sense of family he desperately longed for. Not because I felt obligated, but because I genuinely cared about him in ways I hadn't acknowledged before. He started becoming more open, more expressive. He laughed a little more. He sat with me in the evenings. Sometimes we talked about serious things, sometimes about simple things, movies, music, school. Each conversation pieced together the emotional cracks that had formed between us. One night, he told me he felt lighter. He said he didn't feel alone anymore. He said he felt like he finally had someone who understood him. I realized then that emotional connection, healthy, supportive, compassionate, can heal wounds deeper than we realize. And the bond between a step-parent and a stepchild can become something incredibly strong when built on trust, empathy, and openness. Months passed, and the atmosphere at home changed. My husband and I sought counseling. Communication improved. Arguments reduced. The silence in the house softened. The tension lifted gradually, like morning fog disappearing as the sun rises. My stepson became more confident, more emotionally stable, more expressive. He no longer carried invisible weight. He no longer hid his feelings. And whenever he needed to talk, he came to me without hesitation. Looking back, that one sentence, "I can't take it anymore," became the turning point of our lives. It forced us to stop pretending. It forced us to face the truth. It forced us to talk, to heal, to rebuild. Not every story of emotional struggle ends in disaster. Sometimes it leads to clarity. Sometimes it leads to understanding. Sometimes it leads to the strengthening of relationships that were quietly falling apart. Today, I see my stepson growing into a thoughtful, emotionally intelligent young man. I see strength in him. I see sensitivity. I see someone who understands pain but also understands healing. And I silently thank the moment he chose to speak. Because his courage didn't just change him, it changed all of us. And that is a truth I will never forget.